Good evening. Tonight's topic is a key turning softly in an old lock. The oldest libraries survived because they accidentally caught fire. Slide with me toward a city of clay and river light. Dawn rests on a flat rooftop above a low city of mud brick. Air is cool, and the light is pale over the plain. At the roof's edge, the slow sway of a thin curtain by a cracked window marks the breeze. From far off, a canal whispers. Water slides along its banks, dim and steady. The city lives on these lines of water that feed fields and cool courtyards. These channels are cut from the Euphrates across the southern Mesopotamian plain. Down in the narrow lanes, a scribe steps carefully with a wooden board of damp tablets. The clay looks dark and slick, with neat wedge signs cut fresh. Think of the marks like tiny bird tracks lined up in rows. He turns into a yard where a simple rack waits to dry the day's notes. Take one small, easy breath, then follow the stair down into shade. A courtyard opens with reed mats along the wall and a low basin for water. Cool air smells faintly of clay and rushes. On a small table, the clay is stacked beside finished tablets. A reed stylus lies ready, its tip cut to press tidy wedges with a soft scratch. The past here opens like a storage crate with a simple latch. What comes out are rations, barley measures, beer tallies, names of officials, and notes of fields, each line meant to keep a city running. On some tablets, a different note appears. A king list sets kings in order and marks a flood as a dividing line. A Sumerian story tells of a great rise of water. A survivor builds a craft at divine warning. What did the writers think lived before that mark? And what did they hope to save by naming it? Clay holds on. Sun can dry it hard. Fire can bake it so it keeps its form for ages, even when roofs fall and rooms burn. That is why so many tablets last while wood and leather vanish, and why their quiet wedges still can be read long after the writers are gone. So we begin with the clay itself and the hands that pressed it. A quiet storeroom holds low shelves of clay tablets. Your fingertips trace a faintly warm tablet, edges a bit rounded. A small lamp glow catches the wedge shadows. A dry mineral smell rises off the clay surface. A reed stylus made these marks. The system is cuneiform, a script built from wedges pressed into wet clay. Early tablets counted barley, jars, and sheep. Later ones noted names, places, and syllables. A scribe in an edubba learned by copying sign lists and number tables, then carried that skill into a household archive or a temple office. One wedge can stand for a number, clusters form words, and totals sit at the end. The clay holds a tidy rhythm. Households, temples, and palaces stacked tablets in rooms meant for keeping track. Receipts for rations shared space with loan contracts, land lists, and letters. Scribes grouped tablets by year or by the name of a king so a clerk could grab the right stack fast. Clay tags tied with string or a basket label by the doorway told you what lived where. Think of these tablets as the original spreadsheets that baked themselves. A faint, chalky dust clings to your fingertips after one careful touch. Fires did their own archiving. Because accidental fires baked raw tablets hard, therefore, many archives survived. When rooms burned hot, the clay turned ceramic and kept the marks. Unfired tablets left in damp air or later floods slumped back toward mud and lost their writing. The ancient backup plan was simple. Leave it near the kiln and pray. Survival bias tilts our view. Cities that burned left thick piles of crisp tablets, while places that slipped away quietly under silt left almost nothing. A broken wall and some potsherds do not keep numbers or names. The records we hold come from the loud endings, not the gentle fades. Among them sit ambitious tablets that step back from daily grain counts and try to set all rulers in order. Some copy older memories, mark a flood as a dividing line, and reach for a time before river trouble. Now open a tablet that tries to organize all time into a single column. A low table holds a Sumerian King List tablet with a neat copy unrolled beside it. The lines run in steady blocks, each row of wedge marks patient and small. Cool clay rests under your palm, lamplight pools on the straight margins, and a faint clay dust hangs in the quiet. Each line follows a set formula. Kingship, descended from heaven, is named first to claim a divine source. Then the text says, kingship settled in a city, names a ruler, and gives a reign. When that rule ends, kingship went to another city, and the cycle repeats. The idea is one kingship moving seat to seat, not many kingships competing at once. After many entries, a short line marks a flood, and the sequence starts again in a fresh city. Think of it like a pinned post that every new admin edits to favor their own page. Copyists in temples and palaces made versions for centuries and used them in teaching. You can almost hear the soft scrape of a stylus tapping as names are rehearsed in a low room, steady and dry. The format drills the mouth, and the order fixes a memory path for public reciting. Before the flood, the rain lengths balloon to impossible spans, a clear signal of sacred time. Because exaggerated rain lengths magnify authority, therefore the flood break feels cosmic. Longest rains ever, 0 term limits. The swelling totals serve a political point. By making early kings look vast, and later rulers who borrow their shine look legitimate. The antediluvian part names places you can still point to on a map of southern Mesopotamia: Eridu, Bad Tabira, Larak, Sippar, Shuruppak. All are real cities on the Tigris and Euphrates plain. The list gives rulers with titles and reigns, but not their deeds. So the names sit like pegs on a board and mark a route more than a story. Legitimacy is the thread. Kings in different cities copied the list and updated the recent end so their town came out on top, while keeping the sacred start intact. The divine descent line at the start gives a high origin. The swollen rains add weight, so the current house feels like the rightful heir. Copies share the bones but differ in the latest names. That shows the text worked as both memory and message. The list is a tool for legitimacy as much as memory. A flood line gives a tidy reason for why rule could shift from one city to the next and still be part of one plan. It turns change into fate and clears space for a new start in a new court. If the list is the outline, the flood tales are the scenes. A reciter sits in a clay brick room, knees tucked by a small lamp. His low voice runs like a slow river, steady and soft. You sit close and feel the hush. Outside, reeds rustle in a canal breeze. Sumerian lines name Ziusudra of Shuruppak, a city on the Euphrates plain. Akkadian tablets tell of Atrahasis, the extra wise man. The Epic of Gilgamesh remembers Utnapishtim and his long boat. Each tradition follows a shared arc of warning, building, riding out the water, and a quiet after. Enlil, the high god of authority, grows angry at people and their noise. Enki, also called E, works as an intercessor and looks for a path to spare life. Divine wrath falls as citywide destruction, and the good order of streets and fields breaks. It is like a city council fed up with noise complaints. Only this council can change the weather. The chosen man is told to build a boat with reeds, wood, and bitumen. In Gilgamesh, the instructions make a boxy craft measured in cubits, sealed inside and out, a floating city block. He shapes frames, ties rope, caulks every seam, and sets a hatch at the top like a single eye. A tar-like whiff of bitumen rises from the hull as he works. A dark sheen settles on pitched rope in the low light. Enki does not warn openly. He speaks through a reed wall, and the wall repeats to the man, as if a house could be a messenger. Because humans clamor angered a high god, therefore a secret warning saved one household. The message is crisp. Pull down your house, build the boat, hide the plan, and load seed and life. Bring family, elders, and the skills of the city for the restart. Close the door when the signal comes. The water comes fast, the city fades under it, and roofs vanish like chalk in rain. The boat lifts and rides days and nights until the peaks reappear and the hull grinds to a stop. In Gilgamesh, Utnapishtim opens the hatch and sends out a dove, a swallow, and a raven, waiting for the one that does not return. When the gods say mute, they mean global volume off. After the drop, the survivor sets out offerings that smoke in the cool air, and the gods gather. Enlil storms, then accepts the outcome, while Enki argues for limits and wisdom instead of another purge. Utnapishtim gains a far-off rest, while Atrahasis hears rules meant to check growth and manage labor. These flood tales draw lines around behavior and power. They tell households to obey, honor the gods, and take on fresh start duties after crisis. They show that seed, craft, and kin must be carried forward, and that order grows from careful memory. Ziusudra stands before the sun god and receives life in a distant place, which marks the end of one age and the duty to tend the next. Kingship resumes after the flood in lists that restart the count, and rites fix how to say thanks and keep the peace. Names of real places sit inside the verses, like Shuruppak, and Kish. Clay tablets from libraries in cities like Nineveh preserve the Akkadian versions that echo older Sumerian lines. Archaeologists working those mounds have found silted layers and abrupt rebuilds that point to big local floods in some periods. The social logic fits river life, where rain in the north can drown the south, and where canal care is survival. The myths read like memory wrapped in meaning, a civic lesson about limits and repair more than a map of a single world-sized event. Let's step out of the story room and down into the trenches, where the silt offers its own version. Breathe in softly to a count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let a long exhale spill out. Slow. Feel the chest soften and the jaw loosen. Let the count be steady. Give the body a short break. No need to try hard. The tempo is gentle on purpose. This is a small reset. Counting gives the mind one simple task. That is enough tonight. If the mind wanders, let it return when it wants. The count can sit nearby. Clay tablets survived. King lists divide time at a flood line, and flood stories explain how a disaster fit into city memory. Let the shoulders drop. Now. Notice small tension leaving the face. Eyebrows smooth. Let that be enough for a moment. Time can stretch a little without losing the thread. You are not missing anything by resting. The thought stays clear, even as the breath slows. The story can wait while the body settles. The thread will still be there when you look again. Ease is allowed here. You can give yourself that. Picture ripples settling on a wide, shallow canal at dusk. A small breeze moving over still water lifts a chill. The ripples slow and vanish. Quiet returns to a simple surface. The image is easy to hold. It sits like a calm line on a page. No rush to interpret the scene. Let it be only what it is. Calm is a useful tool. The canal keeps its course without demand. We keep an easy pace from tails to ground. We pause because careful steps help a sleepy mind. Therefore, nothing will rush you. The path stays clear and simple. Each piece will meet the next without hurry. No leaps are required. You do not need to remember every name. The direction is steady and kind. If a detail drifts by, it can drift. The outline matters more than labels. You are doing fine. We are not racing a clock. Take one more slower breath and let it go. Keep the voice unhurried and kind. See dust motes drifting out of the lamplight at the edge of the room. Let small thoughts pass if they want to pass. Let the quiet do the work. Curiosity can idle and still be present. Patience is part of the work. Take the next step only when it feels easy. Ready. Kneel by the trench wall and read the mud. A trowel rests on a pale band of packed silt in the trench wall. The edge of the blade taps a hard spot, then a soft one. Cool grit sits under your nails, and damp clay gives a cool, earthy smell. Inside the silt are mixed sherds, little slopes of broken pottery folded into the layer. The band looks quiet at first, but it cuts across older floors like a new page glued over a notebook. Shuruppak shows a flood layer like this, a light gray sheet that lies between lived-in surfaces and later rebuilding. The city's ancient name, Fara, sits on many dig labels, but the soil speaks more than the name. Stratigraphy recorded by archaeologists lays it out as neat profiles and notes, with that silt sitting where water settled, not where a mason planned. Similar bands show up at Kish and at parts of Ur and Uruk, and in low ground near Lagash. They do not look identical. Some hold fine sand, some hold more clay, some carry more household debris. Field drawings compare thickness, depth, and what sits above and below. At one site, the flood band is a smear, no thicker than a finger. At another, it is a handspan, capped by a fresh floor. Dates do not line up cleanly across the plain, and the rivers nearest each city tell their own story. Because rivers shift and overtop levees, therefore low cities get buried in sudden silts. Think of it like a city basement after a burst main, messy, local, not apocalyptic. The river has no respect for property lines. Trench sections show how patchy it was. A silt lens cuts across an alley, then fades under a doorway. Sherds inside the layer are mixed, not the tidy discard of a swept room. That is floodwater pulling street trash and broken bowls into a single rush, then dropping them as the water slows. One dig finds rush mat impressions pressed into the top of the silt, as if a walkway had to be laid quickly once the muck dried. Another finds a few lumps of melted mud brick and a collapsed corner, then an immediate fix in the next course. What does that mean for a story of a flood? Archaeology supports serious floods, not a world-ending deluge. The silt bands point to inundations that hit some districts harder than others. They point to people pushed for a season, not erased. The consequence of flood was displacement and rebuild, not species reset. Households likely moved to a dry rise, brought goats, stored jars, and waited it out. When water fell, they cleaned floors, salvaged bricks, and raised new walls atop the gray sheet, and the potters fired again. River air moves through tall grass on the levee in your mind, but the work is the point. The way the layers differ matters. Shuruppak's band anchors one memory. Kish has another, or may have several small pulses, not one grand one. When later storytellers spoke about a flood that ends one age and starts another, they were drawing on a pattern that workers on the ground knew well. A flood had a top and a bottom in the soil, and it came back, and it disrupted plans. Asher and Akkad would learn the same lesson centuries later, just with new walls and different channel bends. The tablet rooms built above some of these bands tell you what came next. Scribes returned to work. Clay got kneaded. Administrative tokens moved again between granaries and workshops. The city did not forget, but it did carry on. Before those gray layers were laid down, there were ordinary days. A kiln glowed. A merchant waited in a shaded lane. A reed stylus scratched neat wedges while a jug cooled by the doorway. Step back a little further and walk a normal day before the water rose. A courtyard bakery brewery hums inside a city yard, the heat of the dome oven warming your knees. Warm air shimmers above the oven mouth, and a thin ash scent hangs in the shade. A wide vat holds mash that bubbles in a steady hush. Steam rises sweet and grainy from the surface. Flatbread puffs on a griddle by the fire, while workers queue for rations, bowls, and reed straws in hand. Beer and bread are the pay. Tall jars for beer and counted loaves for the day. At the doorway, canal water glints through a gap, a cool stripe beyond the hot room. Canal officials keep the roster that decides which field drinks and when, and they send word with a tablet or a sharp voice. Think of the canal roster like a shared calendar everyone actually follows. Because canals set planting and tax schedules, therefore families timed labor to water turns. If a field sits wet too long, salts creep up and yields fall. If a canal clogs or a levee fails, seed rots or harvest stalls. White crust flashes on tired soil, and hooves drag in sticky furrows. A wooden plow leans by the wall, its beam polished by hands and rope. A small cylinder seal rests beside a jar, ready to roll its carved scene over damp clay to show who drew what. A steward tallies barley by measures, tips a jar to fill a bowl, and nods at the line to keep it moving. HR was a jar of barley and your seal impression. The mash has its own schedule, the oven its rhythm, and the canal its turn. People fold their day around these pulses. Pre-flood city life lived this way, coordinated and industrious, but dependent on predictable water. That predictability took work, which is why rosters, rations, and water turns were kept legible and enforceable by marks in clay made with a reed and a steady hand. The soft scratch of wedges keeping order as surely as a gate. Now watch a student scribe turn all that motion into neat marks. A teacher calls out number signs as you sit on a reed mat. Reed mat fibers creak under your shift of weight. Damp clay is cool against your fingertips. This is the edubba, the scribal school. Edubba means tablet house, and pupils here start with numerals and commodity signs before anything that sounds like a sentence. Clay tokens fill small baskets. A cone can mark a measure of grain, and a sphere can stand for a jar of oil. Bully, hollow clay envelopes, trap the tokens inside, while seal impressions on the outside show what should be there. If there is a dispute, the bulla can be broken to check the count. Flat tablets replace the envelopes with the same marks pressed in. Over time, signs begin to carry sounds, so names and verbs join the tallies. Think of it like an app update. Receipts came first, and the novels were a feature update. A stylus makes a quick tap-tap as it kisses damp clay. One wedge wrong can mean a porter misses his ration, or you face penalties. Receipts fix grain, beer, and labor days in neat rows. The room smells of wet earth, and the teacher counts in a steady tone. Because rations and trade ran on counts, therefore writing began with ledgers before stories. Sexagesimal notation sets the rhythm. Base 60 lets halves, thirds, and twelfths fit cleanly, with place value managed by context and spacing. Tables of numbers teach how to divide and multiply, and how to convert measures across fields and jars. The habit rides on into hours and minutes, and into 360 degrees of a circle, long after these rooms close. Scribal school life favors drills. Students copy number tables, metrology lists, and then model receipts. Homework was copying barley, barley, more barley. Practice tablets pile up, pocked with wedges, and a tidy pile means a student stayed late. Those drills carry a quiet bonus. The same hands that logged barley could draw a flood line in a king list and press the tale of Ziusudra into neat wedges. A mind trained to keep columns straight can also keep a story steady. Ledger skills make memory durable when stories need a place to live. Storerooms and their records sit under watch. Temple households manage fields, flocks, and canals, and palaces pull in labor and tribute. Officials count, priests approve, and scribes turn stores into numbers that travel. Who holds the tablets and the keys holds the city's nerves. Step out to where the temple steps lift above the rows of warehouses. Barley sacks thump onto the courtyard floor as a scribe presses a reed into a damp tablet. You are in the ziggurat precinct, at the door of a temple granary, where tallies decide who eats and who labors. Sunlight stripes the mud brick steps. The soft scratch of the stylus keeps time. A curl of incense threads past stacked baskets, a light resin scent hanging in the warm air. An ensi, or sometimes a lugal, stands on the raised doorway and watches the count. Temple officials measure out barley rations for workers, ox teams, and boat crews, while an assembly of townsfolk looks on. Civic assemblies do not run the bins, but their presence shows consent and sets limits. A sangha oversees offerings. A nubanda sets work crews. The tablet man records each recipient. Temples ran like a mashup of city hall and a warehouse club. Quiet murmurs rise when a basket looks light, and the steward corrects the line. Ration bowls and work rosters set the rhythm of city life. Tidy rows of wedges marking duty and right. And because surplus flowed through temples, therefore rulers could fund canals, and when needed, conflict. Corvée labor pulled households into seasonal projects, from dredging silted channels to hauling bricks for walls. Payments came as barley, oil, or beer, and many women wove in temple-linked workshops for set shares. Debt obligations tied many to these cycles when harvest failed or fees piled up. Miss a due date and interest grew like reeds in spring. Membership had privileges and late fees. The consequence of inequality and debt servitude shows up in those tablets as names who work off grain loans under another household's seal. Stored grain cushioned both drought and a ripped embankment, so city rulers controlled the flow that kept panic away. Festivals, repairs, and guards drew pay from the same stacks that fed orphans and sailors. The payoff was clear. Power managed risk but concentrated benefits. Assemblies could push back in disputes, yet big households and temple staff gained most from the steady flow. Scribes noted all this with calm strokes, and later copyists carried the memory onward when cities shifted, dynasties changed, and the old ledgers were recopied for new schools. In later tablet schools, students copied old accounts and king lists, keeping the office names and grain tallies alive. Let the last smoke fade from the courtyard and follow the tablets into the later hands that kept them alive. Breath leads the way. Take a slow inhale. Let it fill the middle ribs. Hold a beat. Exhale longer. Let the shoulders drop. Air moves through the nose, cool and easy. The room is steady. Evening air cooling a sun-warmed wall. Quiet pools. Clay tablets held counts. Barley in jars, sheep on hooves, beer in skins. Signs marked entries. Neat and small, scribes learned on practice lists, then on the real stuff. Tokens and bullae sat in the past, but numbers on clay took over the job. Cylinder seals rolled like signatures and showed who had authority. Ration lines linked workers to storehouses and work crews, because tallies tied herds, rations, and labor to named people. Therefore, the storehouse sat at the center of city power. Think of it like a city running on spreadsheets made of mud. The stylus scratch was the sound of a system doing its daily work. Water runs quiet in the mind. Picture calm water under a low bridge, a quiet ripple beneath a reed skiff. Clay banks hold still in the shade. Sun lies bright on the far side. Feet pass above. Cartwheels pass later, and no one has to hurry. Jaw softens on its own. Let the back teeth part. Let the tongue rest easy against the palate. Throat, cheeks, and lips can do less. The room hum is low like a far kiln cooling. Shoulders stay dropped. Hands can rest where they are. Copyists kept these memories moving. Young hands trained in the tablet house, the edubba, copying signs until the lines felt natural. Old hands checked wedges and spacing. Colophons at the end named a scribe, a teacher, or a city. Some lines asked Nisaba, the writing goddess, for favor. King lists, flood myths, and delivery notes shared shelves. A broken tablet called for a fresh copy, and so a story crossed years by being remade. Flood talk lived next to payroll, and that pairing tells us how writing served both memory and bread. A soft landing waits with them, with the copyists who carried these memories onward. Breath comes light again. Take one last easy inhale. Let it out in a slow ribbon. The edges of the old scene stay calm, like light fading on baked brick. The air feels simple against the skin. Now step into a later room where old stories get new clay. Labeled reed baskets line the wall, each with a clay tag naming a god, a city, or a series. You sit on a low bench in a later library room, knee-brushing a tray of tablets as a row of baskets rustles when someone passes and lamp smoke thins near the high ceiling. Colophons at the tablet edge state who copied, where and what series the piece joins. Some add a date, the city, a warning not to steal, or a note that the text was checked against an older tablet. Catalog tablets list works by their first line and give sequence numbers so a reader can find Part 2 after Part 1. Those simple tools kept older Sumerian hymns, myths, and king lists readable as libraries expanded in Assyrian and Babylonian centuries. Scribal schools, the tablet houses, trained students to copy model texts until the lines sat firm in the hand. Lexical lists, proverbs, hymns, and myths moved from exemplar to practice tablet, then into fair copies. Sumerian lived on as a learned language even when daily speech shifted to Akkadian, so bilingual notes and glosses often sit in the margins, guiding the reader through old phrasing with new words. It's a long-running software fork each generation maintains and patches. Dry clay clicks softly as tablets are stacked and unstacked. A reed stylus scratches in a corner as a junior scribe fixes a faded sign, the sound small and steady. Because scribes recopied for centuries, therefore, pre-flood ideas crossed kingdoms and languages. Copying also bends a line. Eyes skip when two phrases end alike, and a word can double when a scribe checks his place too fast. Editors smooth a god's title to match the local temple, update a city name, or add a short note to explain an old measure. A later version of a flood story can echo the older Sumerian tale, yet bring in Akkadian turns of speech, rearranged speeches, and a new ending that fits the classroom or the court. Colophons sometimes admit the mix, saying a tablet was copied from an ancient one or collated with another. Version control was a thumbprint and a prayer. Tablet libraries tied these threads together with order. Shelves and baskets held complete series, stray fragments, and school copies marked with exercise lines. Catalogs recorded what the room owned and what was missing, often by the opening line rather than a title, so a lost piece could be hunted by memory. When a set moved from Nippur to Nineveh, it moved with labels, colophons, and students who knew how to read them. All of this shapes what we hear about the time before a flood. The Sumerian King List draws a line at a great flood, gives long reigns to early kings, and then resets the count with cities you can map. Flood tales like the Eridu story and the Akkadian Atrahasis survive in overlapping pieces, not in a single master copy. The school favored versions that taught elegant signs and proper speech, while temples favored those that fit ritual and theology. Library catalogs and teaching tablets decided what stayed within reach, so gaps and emphases are not accidents. They are choices made by people who cared about order, memory, and usefulness. What reaches us is not a raw feed from the deep past. It is curated memory, gathered, sorted, and taught until it felt stable to the hands that held it. You can almost see the chain of care in the fingerprints pressed into drying clay and in the calm notes at a tablet's edge. Set one tablet back into its labeled basket and let the room settle. The rustle stops, the smoke thins, and the high space feels quiet again, like a page closing without a snap. Let the baskets grow still and the room dim toward sleep. Floods marked memory, and the tablets keep a glimpse of the busy world that came before. Thanks for sharing these late minutes. Your room is quiet. The day has stepped back. The thought of clay and careful hands can rest beside you. I'm grateful for your steady attention. It is gentle company in a late hour. Slow stories fit this time. Unclench your hands. Take one longer breath, slow at the end. Let your eyes rest behind their lids. The buzz of the day can slip away like a light, fading in another room. You do not have to hold anything up now. One neat wedge pressed into clay can be your anchor if you wake later. Picture the small press, a clean sign. Nothing to solve, nothing to measure. If thoughts arrive, notice them, then look back at that small sign. Just that tiny mark and a soft quiet around it. Small and clear is enough. Steady water and quiet nights are my wish for you. May your thoughts grow quiet then settle. If they lift again, that is fine. Let the clay dust settle, and let your breath guide you back to now. The hard parts can wait for morning. Good night.